Welcome to Marvelous Videos. I'm your host, Tia Ayer. Once again, we come to you with an amazing video. Animalistic Humanoids, Changeling from the Hallow, 2015, explained in detail. Fairy folk, trolls, changelings, and other creatures from Irish mythology and folktales come together to make this movie one heck of a scary one. You often don't connect them to danger or malice, but turns out that they have a soft spot for taking away people's babies and replacing it with one of their own. Every culture has their own version of the boogeyman, and the Irish have long believed in the existence of the fae folk and the threat of their children in the form of changelings. Corin Hardy places all of these elements in the backdrop of a deep, dark wood with moss and fungus, and black goo dripping from everywhere, and it is really hard to look away. The story revolves around a young couple who have shifted to the Irish countryside with their newborn baby, and things slowly go from bad to worse as Adam, the father, investigates the trees and finds a black tar fungus. The pace of the movie is just right, and it was after a long time that I actually felt scared for the people in a horror movie. So what exactly happens in this movie? Before we go into our explanation, we have a very small request. If you like our content, please support us by subscribing to our channel. This is a small click for you, but for us, it means a lot. Thank you. Let's begin. Nature has a dark side. The Hallow, 2015. The movie starts with one of the oldest horror movie tropes in the book, the one where a young family moves into a new house in a remote location, and it was shot on location in Ireland. Adam and his family, comprising of his wife Claire and their baby boy Finn, have relocated to a new home and moved to a rustic mill house in the woods where he works. Adam is a British conservationist, and he moves through trees with his son strapped to his chest, gathering samples and appraising the forest logging potential on behalf of a development business, a mission that does not sit well with the grimy, murmuring locals. Fun fact, films like Alien 1979, The Evil Dead 1981, The Fly 1986, and The Thing 1982, along with Irish folktales, inspired the movie. In the opening of the movie, Adam comes across a deer carcass with black goo dripping off of it, and he takes a sample home and on further inspection realizes that it is a weird mutating fungus. On the other hand, the fact that his work entails going into the forest and investigating the trees, the locals end up naming him the Tree Doctor. But it's not out of love or endearment. Instead, the locals are angry, scared, and apprehensive of what might happen as a result of his investigations. Their neighbor Colm dislikes them the most and often threatens them to stop Adam's work and leave the village. While Adam doesn't pay much attention, Claire starts getting worried. The hostility between them and the villagers seemed to reach its peak when the window to Finn's nursery is broken, and they assume that it was Colm's doing. They call the police, who insist that it was a bird, but also warns them about the superstitious nature of the village folk and their beliefs in the hollows that live in the woods. Not wanting to give in to any of their threats or warnings, Adam continues his work the next day, and he goes into the village to get the window frame fixed. While the carpenter helps them out, he also asks them to put the iron rods that Claire had removed from the windows back into place. It is on the drive back that things start to go very wrong. With baby Finn in the back seat, Adam loses control of the car and it skids across the forest road, but Adam stops. It's just in time to avoid any major accident. He gets out to check and sees that the same black tar all over the engine, along with thorns and brambles growing into the engine. As he goes to look for tools in the trunk of his car, something pushes him aside and locks the trunk. This scene will definitely get your heart racing as you watch Adam try to escape and get to a crying Finn who is scared because something is trying to break into the car and take him away. Finally, he manages to cut his way through the back seat and get home. The car is covered with scratch marks, which scares him. While he was out, Colm had come to visit Claire and to warn her. He had left behind a fairy grimoire for her to read, which detailed the creatures in the woods and the phenomena of the changelings. Adam and Claire decide to call the police, but get increasingly worried and decide to leave in their car. They make their way to the car but get attacked by humanoid goblin-like creatures with hollow black eyes and pale skin. And while they are able to start the car, the creatures cause them to crash, and they are forced to come back and take shelter in the house. It is here that Adam gets stabbed in the eye with one of their spikes, and they realize that light repels them, so Adam goes to turn on the generator, after which they start barricading the windows and doors with iron. They then put Finn into a cupboard and protect him, and Adam reads the grimoire where he learns about changes moments before Finn is abducted and taken away. Finn was actually created using a combination of animatronics and actual twins who were digitally photographed in front of a blue screen. Adam tries to follow the sounds to find Finn and goes up into the attic, but he falls down and breaks his leg, knocking him unconscious, and when Claire fails to wake him up, she runs off into the woods on her own to find Finn. While she is searching for Finn, we see Adam undergo changes as he transforms into a Hallow himself because of the symbiotic fungi he had found earlier. The book had warned him, "If you trespass and put down roots, Hallow be thy name." His eye changes color, and he starts devolving little by little. Claire manages to find Finn floating in a river, and she brings him back home only for Adam to shout, saying that he wasn't Finn at all. Instead of believing him, she thinks that he is sick, and after he tries to attack Finn, she runs away with Finn into the village for help. She knocks on Combs' door, but turns them away at gunpoint, and we see her wander into the woods with only a camera flash to defend her and her baby. The creative sound design here combines the high-pitched electronic whine of a charging flash camera to disturbing effect, evoking the Baroque organic danger of Guillermo del Toro's enchanted other worlds. Adam's condition worsens, and we see elements of body horror as spikes shoot out of his face and shoulders, and he ventures into the woods to find the real Finn. He finds him in a cave amongst many hollows and manages to pry him away from them. He returns to Claire and pleads with her to pick the real Finn, and she finally relents and leaves the changeling behind as she runs away with Finn, and the changeling burns to ashes in the sunlight. Adam also dies in the end. When the film examines the theme of blatant environmental insensitivity and nature's wrath, it is at its most powerful. The creature's effects of the monsters, or the Hallow, are one of the major highlights of the movie. They're both creepy as well as beautiful to look at in their own peculiar manner. They're remarkable, everything you want in a creature feature horror picture, from the first clue of what they are when they are seen briefly moving out of the shadows into the light from the tailgates, to their full-on unveiling when they attack the Hitchens' home. They are available in a range of forms and sizes.
You need help. We need to get you help.
The Changelings, Animalistic, Humanoids explained. The concept of changelings has been around for quite some time and was extremely prominent during the medieval ages. Irish folktales and mythology also talk about changelings and how fairies replace human babies with one of their own, and more often than not, they are considered dark, negative, and terrible creatures that are hideous and grotesque to look at. A fairy who is swapped in place of a human baby is referred to as a changeling. The mortal child is returned to the land of the fairies, where he or she is reared and put to work while the creature left behind usually becomes sick and dies. Even if some grow up to be adults, the community will always see them as weird. In most stories concerning changelings, they are described as unattractive, tiny old men. Babies with abnormally big body parts or facial traits are among the other descriptions. Basically, any flaw or deformity could indicate that a fairy abducted your child. If a changeling exactly resembles one's child, how can someone tell the difference? According to folktales, there are 3 ways. The first way is to inflict violence upon the child by beating it because it was believed that the fairies would hear the cries of one of their own and come to save it, thus also returning the child that they took. The second way is to scare it by threatening to boil it or scald it with a hot iron rod, and this is the method that Adam uses to figure out that the baby that Claire had saved was not really Finn when he threatened to stab it. The last way was to make the changeling reveal its name and age, after which it would have to be taken away by the fairies. In the movie, the fairies have grayish, decrepit skin, huge foreheads, small eyes, and short pointed fangs. Their bodies are infested with an obnoxious fungus that grows in enormous masses and vines. They can turn humans into fairies by injecting them with the same black fungus, as well as cause rot in structures and living creatures, as seen with the house Adam and Claire lived in and the deer corpse Adam discovers. However, where does this myth folktale about fairy tales and changelings come from? Well, before the 1900s, one motivation for killing a kid had to do with money. A child who was unable to work due to a disability was a drain on the family's limited funds, especially if they grew up to be adults. In certain respects, killing a kid was considered as vital to ensure the survival of the rest of the family. This tradition can be traced all the way back to the ancient Greeks and Rome. It's easy to understand how the practice may have spread and continued long after the empire had fallen apart. These irregularities were one thought to be a sign of sinister activity when medical knowledge was rudimentary or non-existent, even as a justification for committing infanticide in exchange for the return of a healthy child. These stories must have relieved some of the guilt felt by the family and community members who chose to look the other way. Because as you can see, the couples did not have a bad child. Theirs was taken by a fairy and replaced with one of their own cursed. Of course, the parents should do everything possible to reclaim their child. It was unfortunate if the changeling perished. However, only the fairies were to blame in this case. For many years, the excuse was accepted. As a result, children with learning problems and deformities were subjected to heinous mistreatment. In fact, children were not the only ones who were subjected to violence and mistrust. While fairy stories about changeling children are more common, there are stories that say that adults can also be replaced by fairies. As a result, they were frequently off or a less than perfect version of themselves. This would have been a simple method to explain a loved one's unexpected onset of a mental concern, such as depression. Changelings are a fascinating aspect of humanity's past. They served as a means for people to justify the actions against children and adults who deviated from the norm. It's a justification for murder. Despite the fact that people largely do not believe in them, they are proof of how monsters were invented to help people live with what they didn't comprehend. However, fairies and changelings continue to be integral parts of Irish folktale, along with being culturally tied to the countries in Northern Europe. Why should you watch The Hallow? The Hallow is an interesting horror movie to say the least. It has concepts and creatures that are not the most common in the horror film genre. Thus, the use of Irish mythology and folktales to turn fairies, something that is usually associated with happiness and joy, into something menacing and applaud-worthy. The visuals are stunning and create a stellar atmosphere, which makes the slowish pace of the movie worth sitting through. The creatures are new and fascinating, with each one being slightly different than the others. You have action, atmosphere, loss, betrayal, and fear, all in one horror movie. But what makes this one truly worth the watch is the fact that you actually genuinely fear for the young family. Corin Hardy manages to get you invested in the story, making you root for their survival, and the ending is fitting because it is not too negative nor too positive, making it quite close to perfect. If you like mythology and folktales of body horror, or you're looking for something new and different, this one is definitely worth watching. Thanks again. We'll see you next time. And if you liked our content, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to us if you haven't already. Have a good one and be safe. Thanks, everyone.